So when I get to the chair's announcements, I will make some proposals on items that we should drop from the agenda. As there are no name tags here, I would like to go around the room so you can introduce yourselves for the benefit of the public who may be wandering in. So my name is John Pye. I'm an independent person and I've been chair of the Audit Committee since the start 5 years ago. If we could go round to the left. It's the middle button. Okay. For those watching from afar, I'm sorry about this technical learning, but this is a new building for us all. Are we all right now with our microphones? Okay. Could you start again, please?
Hi, my name is Mohammed Asim. I'm a councillor for Prettyford City Council.
Mike Sargent, Cambridge City Council.
Graham Wilson, Cambridgeshire County Council.
David Brown, East Cambridgeshire District Council.
Ian Benny, Fenland District Council.
Thank you very much. We have apologies. Councillor Nawaz is substituted by Councillor Hasib. Councillor Graham Bull has sent his apologies, no substitution. And Councillor Tony Mason sent his apologies, and his substitute may be watching in but is unable to be here today. So anybody who's joining us online, it's not part of our quoracy and there's no voting rights. Could members say if they have any disclosable interests for the meeting? No disclosable interests. Okay, we now need to just do the minutes. Are people happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? And are we happy to approve them? Okay, thank you. Right, so on to the chair's announcements. I've got 3 items. Firstly, quoracy. We are barely quorate today, and it was very unfortunate that we were unable to proceed with the meeting on the 26th of November because we were not quorate. I don't think it shows us in a very good light, but I know that diaries are difficult as well. So could I encourage members to have a dialogue with their substitutes so that in future we don't run the risk of having to cancel another meeting when we're all assembled. And for those who are here on the 26th of November and those who are here today, I thank you very much for being present. I said at my opening remarks that under the public health guidelines we are encouraged to reduce the business to what needs to be done to minimise the time being together. So I have some proposals to make on items that we would drop from the agenda, and then once I've listed those, I welcome members' agreement to proceed on that basis or to any other comments. So I propose dropping item 4, the Combined Authority Update, item 6, the internal audit update. On item 7, which is external audit, we need to take it, but we should focus on the management representation letter only. We should drop item 11, which is the climate change working group, and item 12, which is treasury management strategy, and item 13, trading companies. Are people content to proceed on the basis of dropping those items? Mike, is that a yes, or did you have a comment?
Sorry, Chair. I'm surprised you've dropped, I think you said, internal audit, because I would have thought that was core to our business, but I've retained the corporate risk register, which isn't core to our business. So I would have said internal audit is something we would want to review, but not the corporate risk register.
Internal audit is to note, and it's not time critical. And the advice I received was that we could leave this to our next meeting, in the interests of. But if you wish, if members wish to have that item on today, then obviously I'm at your hands.
I mean, I would be happy to drop both, but I just didn't see the corporate risk register as something that was core to our business.
Yeah, well, the risk register, we are asked to make recommendations, and I felt we couldn't drop it as one of our roles is to make recommendations to the board if we have any. And I would propose with the risk register that we just focus on that piece when we get to it. Are there any other comments, or are we happy to proceed? I think it's honour bound on all of us to try and, this is never easy once you get into the flow, but to try and restrict our comments on the papers that we do take to substantive things in your mind, given the special circumstances. Thank you very much. These items that we've dropped will go into the work programme for the next meeting, which is in January, but when we are looking at that in the new year for the preparation, we may have to extend we'll have to think about the agenda management and whether it's containable within a reasonable time, but that's something I will undertake with officers. Another announcement I had to make was that we had originally in our work programme a development session that was going to be today on the role of the audit committee in projects, and that has been we look to programme that next year. And lastly, I wish to report that you members will remember that we were, or the combined authority went through a recruitment exercise for an independent person as part of the complaints procedure, and I can report that an independent person called David Pearl has been appointed, and a reserve independent person is Gillian Holmes, and that was ratified by the Combined Authority Board in October, and both these independent persons provide the similar role with other councils. That completes my Chairman's remarks. If we go to item 5 now, which is the Corporate Risk Register, which Robert Parkin will introduce. As I said, I think we should just focus on whether members have any recommendations that they wish the committee to make to the Combined Authority Board. Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So, just for clarity, the terms of reference of this committee do include risk management matters, which is why we bring the register to you. Want to focus on 2 points. Firstly, as the report states, where we are working with RSM in their capacity as advisors on risk management, risk strategy, to look at our approach to risk management, and one of the outputs of that work will be to ensure that this committee is put in the best place to support that work, and we will think about how we present the risk register to you. So do expect some innovations and developments around that. I'd like to focus on changes to the risk register. As you see, it's a lengthy document. Those are described in the report at at paragraphs 2.6 through to 2.10. And as you see in the papers, there's a narrative explanation around changes to each of those risk entries. I'm not proposing to go through them line by line. We should have colleagues, directors available via Zoom to be able to talk to risk items falling within their area. Finally, I'd like to note that the climate change item, when presented to the Combined Authority Board, we reported into the Combined Authority Board that the residual risk assessment on that was considered low. The board shared that concern, and that's since been revised up. Happy to take any questions, Chair, and as I say, we are joined, or should be being joined via Zoom by colleagues in the directorates who may be able to give more of a detailed analysis of each risk entry relating to their area.
Thank you. David Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Robert. A couple of meetings ago, I think it was, we asked the risk management team to consider the risk associated with increases in fuel costs. I just wondered whether that is going through the process.
That's a good question. I need to follow that up and see where that's fitting into the any of the pre-existing risks. Councillor Brown, Chair, I think we'll need to report back to members after this meeting on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Thanks, Simon.
So I'm on page 21, and I am confused about the designations for 21 and 32, which is both to do with the housing programme. The impact of losing funding for 243 housing units at North Doe is an impact of 1, which, I mean, I know a lot of the background, but you know, would seem very strange. But then further down at 32, then obviously there's a massive impact in terms of no future funding. The likelihood was very high. I would say that 21 and 32 should have the same likelihood because they come out of the same discussions, if you like, with DLUHG, is it called these days? So I would have thought the impact for 21 would be a bit higher, and the likelihood of both 21 and 32 should be the same.
Yep. So thank you. So these relate to the housing programme, and 21 refers to the risk event. Just moving through this large spreadsheet of up to 45 million of funding not being provided. As Councillor Sargent says, there is a difference in the scoring on the residual score, which is as to the impact, and there's a variance as between that and a very similar risk later in the table. And yeah, I think that's a fair point. We have got Roger available, who might be able to go into a little bit more detail on whether the respective impacts would be the same, if that would assist. But I think the general point's clear that they both appear to pertain to the same set of causes and consequences. So I think that prompts me to think that they should be brought into alignment. But Chair, if it would assist, we could bring Roger Thompson onto the conversation unless that's considered satisfactory.
Or would we be happy just that the minutes record that we ask officers to arrange for those two items to be reviewed to get them aligned? Okay, so that can just
Happy with
remind
that.
me, that was 21 and 32. Okay, thank you. Graham?
Robert, can I just ask about risk ID 31 on page 14? It says that the risk about a lack of political agreement on forward strategy was discussed at the Combined Authority Executive Team. But looking at the table later on, it looks as though all the risk has been pretty much mitigated by actions that are being incorporated by leaders or whoever. Is that still an issue for the Combined Authority Executive Team, or are you comfortable that everything has been mitigated? And just to show that I did compare the tables, I think, but I wouldn't swear to it, the impact and likelihood scores are transposed in one or other of the table. The overall rating is 8, but I think on one it says likelihood 2, impact 4, and the other one it says likelihood 4, impact 2. But I don't think that's a big deal, but it's more, are you comfortable that all the actions being taken about a lack of political agreement on forward strategy are actually being addressed?
Thank you, Councillor. So the mitigation steps are in flight. They're not concluded. The actions that are described in the mitigation steps are yet to be completed, of course. But I'm certainly aware that work is being undertaken by officers and with the leaders at the board level on future strategy and forward strategy. So that's something that is being, lots of efforts being put into, and that's certainly an area of focus at the moment. Obviously, as time goes by, hopefully we'll start to see the products of that. And thank you for noting those score points. I think that's a point that we need to get in order. Again, it happened before, I think, in terms of that disparity in the input score and then the residual score. So.
Could I ask, Robert, is that item 31 is a new risk, is it not? The lack of agreement on a forward strategy.
So, yes, without checking back to the last one, there's nothing here that states okay.
And I think those of us who attended the looking ahead session that we had with directors some weeks ago, the clarity of the purpose and the forward direction of the Combined Authority was something that went through all the presentations that we heard. And I wondered if members wanted to, in reporting back to the Combined Authority, would they support a view that we welcome that inclusion of that risk, and that we look forward to further reassurance that the actions to ameliorate the impact are actually being put in place.
Well, I certainly would, and one of my concerns about our horizon scanning discussions was that it seemed very short term. It was concentrating on things which directors had already planned to do rather than looking 5, 10, 20 years in the future. The mitigations included in this item do refer to a growth ambition statement and the business plan process and so on, but I suspect even that will be concentrating on 1 year's activity rather than longer term activity. And it would be good to at least consider the mayor's term in office and what he anticipates delivering during that period. but hopefully beyond.
Okay. Do I sense that we've got support for words that affect to go to a report back to the Combined Authority report? We welcome it. We look for reassurance that it's moving forward, but we are concerned that the time horizon might not be long enough. Are we happy with that? Record taker? Okay, thank you. Are there any other aspects or recommendations on the risk register that members wish to discuss? No. Okay, thank you. And we do look forward to your point at the beginning, Robert, that you're continuing to make innovation on how the risk register is managed and embedded in the management system of the Combined Authority. Thank you. I'm trying to keep up with what I'd knocked out. And okay, so the next item is external audit. And we should have people joining remotely. Mark Hodson from EY.
Indeed. Good morning.
Rob Emery from the
Morning, Chair.
CPCA. And here, members will recall that this is these are pieces of work which we were unable to take earlier, but we have seen aspects of it. And what I believe we should focus on today in item 7 is particularly whether we are able to receive and approve the management representation letter. Are you going to introduce? Who's going to introduce?
I'm happy to, Chair.
I think we need a bit more sound.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think so. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members will recall that EY presented their initial audit report results to the committee in July. Since then, Suresh Patel, who was our previous EY partner responsible for our audits, has left the organisation, and thus we welcome Mark Hodson, who has replaced him. Following completion of the outstanding procedures related to the pension liabilities and a review of the annual governance statement, EY have given us the addendum report that's attached to this report. And Mark's here to update on the report or answer any questions that may pertain to the accounts in the next item. In addition, we're required to make representations to EY every year on behalf of the Combined Authority in a letter to be signed by the Chief Finance Officer and the Chair of this committee. That letter is Appendix 2 to these papers. Mark, is there anything you wanted to add about your report?
Thank you, Rob, and morning, members. So I think it was important from our perspective that you had an update report from us because of the elapsed time from July to now and your approving of the financial statements today. And in essence, the key takeaways from our addendum update is that nothing has changed since July. So we are giving you the same assurances that you had in July, but hopefully in a more up-to-date, timely manner. And we are proposing to issue an unqualified audit opinion immediately after this meeting when we receive the signed documentations. So we have performed a couple of additional procedures that we need to do because of that elapsed time, but there is nothing coming out of those procedures which I need to make you aware of.
So, members, do we have any comments, or are we happy to approve the representation letter? Sorry. Thank you. I forgot to turn on my microphone. Are there any comments, members, or are we content to approve the management representation letter and note the other aspects? David Brown.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to approve.
Well, then I'll take it that we're content. Sorry? No?
I'm also content, but I know within the county council we've had an issue about the value for money part of the audit. And I just wonder whether EY or the Combined Authority can comment on that aspect, and then we'll agree the management letter.
Who would like to speak? Can we ask the external auditor, please?
You may, of course. So we have completed our value for money arrangements work in respect of the Combined Authority for 2021, and we had no significant risk that Suresh reported previously, and we have no matters to report by exception within our audit report, which was in our original audit results report, and we have performed subsequent procedures up to today's date, and there are no new risks that we need to take into account.
Okay. Thank you. On that basis, then I take it that members are content to approve the management representation letter. We can move on to the next item. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which are the annual accounts and the annual governance statement. And I think from an email I got 3 minutes before I came to this meeting, there's an update to come from Rob Emery before we ask the external auditor to comment.
There is, thank you, Chair. Following the previous item, which Mark has thankfully just told us that we've got a clean audit report once we send it to them, the committee has recommended to ratify the approval of the final statement of accounts 2021 and approve the annual governance statement for that period. As the Chair mentioned, and at the time of publication, there were no changes to the draft accounts that the committee received in July. However, yesterday there was an update to one of our subsidiary companies, Peterborough HE Property Company's draft accounts, and that's resulted in the need to change 2 of the figures in note 1 of the accounts. There is no material impact on the Combined Authorities accounts whatsoever. There are no changes to the group consolidated accounts. There are 2 figures in note 1 that are going to change due to this. It's not due to any change in the operational financial viability of the subsidiary. It's simply that they slightly revised down their loss for the year, which results in a change of 139,000, and substantially reduced their net asset position from 26.4 million to 8 million. While the latter sounds potentially scary, it's actually due to a change in how the company recognises the money it's owed by its shareholders for shares which have been issued but have not yet been asked to be paid by the company. So there's no change in the position of the company, it's purely how that position is recognised in the accounts as the money owed to them. Because the change for the profit and loss of 139,000 is below the reporting materiality threshold for the Combined Authorities accounts, the accounts themselves will not be updated for that. Purely that number in note 1 will be changed. Similarly, because the balance sheet of the subsidiary doesn't impact on the Combined Authorities consolidated accounts, the change from 26 million to 8 million only results in a change of a single figure in note 1 to the accounts. If members wish to remind themselves of that note, it's page 20 in the document that was linked as a background to this paper. In terms of the annual governance statement, there have been 2 changes since the draft that was presented in July. First is in response both to challenge from this committee, which was entirely fair. In July, there were remedial actions to address control weaknesses from our IT systems control audit. It was agreed at the time with internal and external audit that putting those in the public domain would not serve the aims of the Combined Authorities' best interest. As those weaknesses have subsequently been addressed by our new IT contractor, the risk of including those details in the annual governance statement has been mitigated, and thus wording that has been agreed with both RSM and EY has been included. Secondly, reflecting that neither the CEO nor the Mayor, who are the 2 signatories to the document, were actually in post during the financial year to which the statement applies, the CEO requested that the wording of the certification be amended. This has been done and is highlighted in red along with the previous change, and EY have agreed appropriate wording, which is that shows that the annual governance statement was approved by the Audit Committee on 17th December 2021, assuming that you do, and that to the best of our knowledge, governance arrangements as defined within the authority's local code of corporate governance have continued to operate effectively. So the vast majority of it has not changed. We've updated the details about the finance audit and shown that the two signatories are signing on the basis of the assurance of this committee rather than their own experience, given that they were not in post. If there's any questions from the committee, I'm happy to take them.
Does the external auditor wish to say anything before I ask members to comment?
I'm happy just to add that we have had full sight of everything that Rob has just portrayed to you, and we have sought additional representations from the subsidiaries audit partner at Assets that the numbers that Rob quoted are the ones that are being reflected within the subsidiary revised accounts, just so there is a triangulation and factual reporting in that note 1. And I do concur that there is no material impact to the group accounts because the 138,000 is below our trivial reporting threshold.
Thank you. Members, any comments? We're asked to approve the final statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. Mike?
I just couldn't get my mind around what this ratify the approval of the final statement of accounts meant. It looks as though that's already been approved somewhere. I'm not quite sure. Perhaps somebody can explain what that means, because obviously it says approve the annual governance statement, but it says ratify the approval, which makes it sound as though it's been approved somewhere else, is it?
Thank you. Rob?
So thank you for the question, Councillor. That was reflecting the fact that at your July meeting, the committee were minded to approve the accounts, but not the annual governance statement, but were unable to formally approve them because they have to be approved as a whole.
Thank you. Are we content to approve them as a whole today? Thank you. They're approved.
Thank you.
Microphone, Chair.
Sorry, microphone again. Thank you, Mark, from Ernst & Young, to join us again today and give us that insight and assurance. The next item on the agenda is the external audit re-tendering process, where this needs to be taken by the Combined Authority Board for their next meeting in order to meet the deadline for giving an opinion, and our role really is to recommend the way forward, and the proposal in front of us is that we should continue. We recommend that we should opt for the national scheme of auditor appointments, which is broadly as we operate now. Any comments from members?
Just to be pedantic, if we're recommending it, do we not have to formally approve that we are recommending it rather than just noting something?
We are recommending it. That was my understanding of what we're being asked to do. Maybe I didn't read the small print, but I think the reality is, are we content with this recommendation that we've had from the officers, and do we support it, and do we recommend to the Combined Authority Board that they should continue with the national scheme option?
Yeah, I certainly do. I was just concerned when it said voting arrangements, note item only, no vote required. I think we do, as you're implying, need to approve it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on the consensus principle. If you would like to have a vote, then we could have a formal vote.
Yeah, it does need a vote, if you like. It's not a note-only item. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Councillors are lighting on the error on the report face, which says that it's a note-only item. That is incorrect. quite rightly put, it does require a positive vote in favour to, as it were, respond to the recommendation. So yes, it'll need to be, a vote will need to be taken or consensus, but it's not a no vote item.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Coming back to the substantive, certainly I would be going with opting into the national scheme. I think we would end up tying officers up in time, trying to run their own tendering contract, which I seriously doubt would come to any better value for our external audit, and I will be supporting the written recommendation.
Okay, well, on the formalities then, I move that we accept the recommendation that's put to us and put that to the Combined Authority Board. Do we wish to vote for? We're all agreed. Thank you. So the next item we're addressing is item 11, which is a key task for us as a committee, is the annual look at the Constitution and to approve and recommend the revisions of the Constitution in the report that is before us. And I'd ask Robert Parkin to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report which we're obliged to bring annually following our annual review of the Constitution. We review the Constitution for errors, legal updates, and areas that we can achieve better clarity in its drafting. In the main issues part of the report, there's a table, and that sets out where amendments are being proposed. Committees asked to consider the proposed amendments. Helpfully, the committee's worked with us in a workshop setting, and has helpfully commented earlier in this, and that's led, as well as our own work, to the building up of this piece and the amendments proposed. So there's quite a lot there. Happy to take any specific questions, Chair.
Thank you. And I must say I was grateful for the way that the paper draws together the key points of the changes that are being proposed, supported elsewhere by the full documentation. Comments from members?
So on page 26, it's VI 6. It says that executive committees will have both their chair and vice chair appointed. I think that's incorrect, and that's certainly not in agreement with page 88, where it says there's no vice chair for executive committees, and the chair is elected at the committee meeting. So.
Sorry, which could you refer me to? Is that chapter 4.2, page 20? Are you looking at is that the entry reference to appointment of vice chair?
This is chapter 5, proceedings of meetings, on page 26, where it's VI 6. It says appoint such executive committees as the combined authority considers appropriate, their membership, and the chair and vice chair. But I don't think the vice chair is appointed by the board, and that's what it confirms on page 88, where it's about meetings of executive committees, where it says there isn't a vice chair. The chair of the meeting is elected at the meeting if the chair isn't present.
I'm struggling. I'm looking at the table that's setting out changes. Are you looking at?
No, I'm looking at the review track changes copy of the Constitution. I'm on page 26, Robert.
sorry, I'm looking at page 26 of the track change document. And could you refer me to the paragraph? I've got 12. It's chapter 5, proceedings of meetings, and we've got rules of debate 3.2.
Right. Okay. Hang on. Yeah. Sorry. I'm in 3.2. The annual meeting will. That's on page. So I'm talking about page 25 of the whole document, but it's actually page 21 of 272, moving on to page 22 of 272. So it's point VI, appoint such executive committees as the combined authority.
Right, so I'm sorry, members of the committee. This is one of the problems we've got when we're looking at different documents. I'm looking at the track changed version of the document, which is on the main reports page at the bottom, and I'm looking at page 2122 of 272.
Yeah, correct. So
and we're looking at annual meeting business, the annual meeting will, and could you steer me to the annual meeting will?
It's VI.
I see. Yeah. So the point there is whether at the annual meeting the vice chair, the chair and the vice chair of the committees is appointed by the annual meeting rather than at the committee itself.
No, the chair is appointed at the annual meeting of the combined authority, but the vice chair is not appointed. There isn't a vice chair of these committees. Is the point I'm making, and that's confirmed on page 88 of the document we've got.
And page 88, so in the language of the Constitution, that's which chapter?
Right, hang on. So this is procedural rules. This is chapter 11. 4, and then it actually says chair and vice chair for that section, which is probably incorrect. And then 4.1, no, it says no vice chair shall be appointed. The committee shall appoint a chair for the meeting when the chair is absent. So I think you'll find there aren't vice chairs of executive committees. I mean, certainly the one I was on last year didn't have a vice chair.
Yeah, thank you. That's very. That's a point we need to resolve. I think what I'd suggest we do is we raise the question when it's taken forward to the Combined Authority Board as to whether they want to continue with having no vice chairs, in which case we need to have corrective drafting. But absolutely, that's a conflict, so that could be noted, Chair, and we can resolve it.
I keep getting waves because I haven't been doing. Right, are there any other comments that people would like, or are we content to approve and recommend the revisions to the Combined Authority Board subject to the comment made by Councillor Sargent? I take it we're agreed. Thank you. And I perhaps I should just say that I think the work that we did before the sort of workshop session and the opportunity to comment on this mass of detail by email has made this morning's session more straightforward than it's been in the past. So I commend to the officers that we should follow that pattern each year with an informal gathering to understand it, an opportunity to comment on the details, and then a paper that draws it together like that, if members are content with that approach. Thank you. And I think that now brings us to the work programme, item 14. We are asked to note it, discuss any topics in the lists, and review the top 5 risks from the risk register, and approve any items for the future work programme. Do members have any comments or discussion, or are we happy to take it as written? Please.
In terms of trading companies, when we've spoken about this before, we said we were going to be given more information on trading companies because it is quite difficult to judge. For instance, the item we had on the agenda that we're not discussing today. So I think we do need that before we have a fruitful discussion on trading companies and what our role is. I was going to just raise today what decisions, for instance, the board can make for trading companies, and I'm not at all clear. So we do need a briefing on it before we can even judge, I would suggest, our role in terms of audit and governance for trading companies. So can I just repeat the request that we have more information on how trading companies are run, please?
Anybody else have it? I mean, we have had a first brush with this in previous meetings, and the item that we've slipped because it's not time critical on trading companies, that would be an opportunity when we next discuss it to throw some light on those sorts of questions. But does anybody else have any views on the trading company dimension? From a work programme point of view, I don't want us to go back into the paper because or would we be content that we take note of Councillor Sargent's remarks and we ask officers, when the trading company's paper comes back to us, that it tries to cast some light in that way? I take that as we're content with that. So the paper on trading companies will need to be revised or expanded, and we may, this is a long journey, I think, for everybody, not just us, but the whole of the combined authority approach to these matters. Please.
I'm not exactly asking for a revision to this document, but I don't think we need background papers on how they operate, really, and that's what I requested at a previous meeting, because I can't really judge what we're being requested to do in our role for audit and governance until I know a little bit more about the trading companies are constituted, if you like, how they operate, and in particular there was reference to in the paper we were going to consider today about decisions that the board can make, for instance. So I would like further briefing on that before I can make a sensible decision on what our role could be. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay. I think you just open the reminders of it's a new journey and it's a tricky journey. But I would ask that we do get some background to accompany the next paper. But I think we've discussed, when we discussed it before, as to what is the role about how the combined authority manages these things, not our role as to how the trading companies work, because they're covered by a different legal. And it seems to me that's the crux of the issue, and that's what the paper we're not seeing today touches on in its proposals. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think we certainly want to meet the challenge of making sure that as committee members you feel fully informed, whether you then settle on a recognition that the role is of a specific nature for this committee. I think it's still good groundwork, and it's incumbent on us officers to give you a sense of a complete picture. Just to give some information to the committee, on an operational level, we are revising the way that we support the companies. We're going through a process of putting in place a new company secretarial, and that's the operation that supports companies on a sort of formal basis, how they run filings, support, and through that process of onboarding there'll be a discovery sort of review, And out of that, there'll be lots of information, and perhaps we could step some of that into a session for this committee to give, information, guidance and structures, and take any questions. So I think we'd want to put some work in on that, and I think there's work going on so we can harness it for the benefit of this committee as well. So I'll certainly take the challenge and request, and we'll work to meet it in this context as we're meeting it in others, the companies.
Yep. Happy for the moment? The reason we have time, because we know that it's complicated, and the paper that we're not addressing is about amending our terms of reference, and this isn't for this constitution review. We just need to be clear that in the constitution next year we've got to a place that the terms of reference for the audit committee in regard to trading companies will not go in this constitution review. That's why it's not on the table today. It'll go into next year's review, so we're not in a rush here. It's better that we understand it to our content than make a precipitate decision. Yes.
I'm not trying to labour this point, Chair, but I mean, certainly in other parts of the country when there have been problems with trading companies, the role of audit and governance has been criticised. And this is a very fast-moving situation. So, I know you are saying that, we're developing, or whatever your words were, our approach to it. But, it's not just that we will need to crack on with it, as it were, in some respects. It's also going to change fairly rapidly year by year, I would suspect. So I just think we need to give it the due urgency so that we aren't in line for criticism if anything ever comes on with our trading companies.
The urgency is the fact that we focused on this or identified it some time ago. Because it is exactly what you say. It's something that we do need to understand properly and make sure that we're playing our appropriate role. So I thoroughly agree. And so we just need to amend in the work programme the wording so that it reflects perhaps more firmly the points that are made by Mike Sargent, and we look for further advice in the way that the monitoring officer has described. So with that comment, are we happy to put the work programme to bed for now? Okay. So I think we've done our duty in regard to the public health guidelines of focusing on the work that needs to be done and minimising the risks. So we come to the end of the meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 28th of January at 10 o'clock. And it will, I'm advised, will be at the East Cambridgeshire District Council. So it just remains me to wish everybody a very happy and safe festive season. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you. Meeting is closed.